What happens when you combine the director of Jaws and the director of Star Wars? You get the perfect movie, maybe? Welcome to Retro Film Review, where we'd like to take a look back at movies that shaped our generation.
I'm Ed.
And I'm Thor. And today we're going to look at 1981's Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark.
So, to me, Raiders is one of the most perfect movies made. The scripting, the directing, the acting, the action. Adventure has a new name. And that is Indiana Jones with Harrison Ford at the helm. This movie is just fantastic. It has one of the best opening sequences.
I would agree with that.
You know, it doesn't necessarily start off and just say, hey, look, this is our hero. You know, he comes out in shadow to this ominous music in the middle of South America, which is funny is the fact that they find one mountain, which happens to be in Kauai, Hawaii, that looks like the Paramount logo, and it does that little blend in right into that.
I didn't even think about it matching the Paramount logo. That's pretty cool.
Well, they've done that for each one of the different films in some way. The Temple of Doom, it was a shield with the gong on it.
Okay.
The Last Crusade was a mountain range, and the...
See, you're a bigger fan of this movie than I am. And that's okay. That's why we're here to review it, though.
Yes, I'm a big old fan. So, but no, originally, Harrison Ford wasn't set to be Indiana Jones.
Right.
Spielberg wanted him, but Lucas was like, he's been in too many of my movies. I don't think we need to get him.
He didn't want to be De Niro and Scorsese.
Right.
Martin Scorsese always had De Niro in a ton of his movies, so he didn't want that reputation.
Right. And do you know who he originally was going to look at?
Tom Selleck.
Tom, Magnum P.I. himself, and thank God he had a TV contract, because I cannot imagine Tom Selleck in this role. He would have been good, but he's not Harrison Ford.
Well, Tom Selleck and Magnum P.I., they actually did one episode where it was basically, it was like Raiders, or Search for the Lost Art, or something like that, and he had the fedora, and he dressed like Indiana Jones. I mean, it was almost a spoof, but it was a serious spoof. It wasn't like a Mel Brooks kind of spoof.
Right. Well, everybody tried to do their Raiders copy after this came out. But this movie, just the way that it set up the story, the way that the layers and the characterization of where people were at the beginning to the end, everything just to me just felt fully fleshed out.
Yeah.
Because Indiana Jones, what's great about him is he's not a superhero. He's
a teacher or a professor.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's that he does amazing things, and he goes and searches for all these incredible artifacts, but he's vulnerable. He has a soft side. He gets hurt. He makes a lot of mistakes. And that's what really made this, I don't know, I guess brought it more home, because you could see this person he just was real.
Right.
Even though this is all totally fictitious and it's supernatural, but he seemed more like a real character. He had flaws and he had motivations, and
I think his biggest flaw was not predicting where his archenemy was going to be every time. Because the two times that we see him go after these artifacts, of course, the Lost Ark of the Covenant, and of course the little statue to begin with.
Right.
The guy is right there. Of course, actually, the guy was there to begin with at the Lost Ark. But
yeah. Well, it's kind of like he says later on, we're just winging this. We're just kind of seeing where it goes. Yeah. But still, one of the Alfred Molina, who later on to become best known for probably Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2, was his helper or guide at the beginning, who eventually betrayed him. But it was there when you realized that Steven Spielberg was really taking no punches with any of this. I mean, you had gore.
Oh, yes.
And it's very much so for what a PG movie was back in the 80s.
Well, it was rated R. at first, and it was based on one scene, and it wasn't where the guy, his helper, his guide, got speared, and you see that to some nice detail there. It was the end scene where the guy's head explodes. It was deemed too gruesome.
Right.
So they put like fire coming up, kind of blurring the image. You could still see the head explode, but it was kind of blurring it, so they changed it to PG.
Yeah.
But there's people getting shot, and then, of course, stabbed and everything else.
Right.
Run over by trucks.
Well, and it was kind of one of the last ones of Spielberg where he really, I guess, he didn't let mainstream Hollywood, in my eyes, kind of blur his senses. Because it was kind of after that he went to really more family features with E.T. and produced The Goonies and Batteries Not Included. And
well, when you talk about E.T., did you know that during scene breaks or shooting breaks, they actually wrote the script for E.T.?
Oh yeah, I did hear that. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
it's and it was actually Harrison Ford's wife who was writing everything down when Spielberg was
Melissa
talking.
Matheson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to work on that and then come up with this other iconic movie.
Right.
And when we talk about George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, when Star Wars came out, the opening, George Lucas thought it wasn't going to make any money. It was going to be a flop. So he went to Hawaii and said, I don't want to be there.
Right.
And Spielberg said, okay, well, I'll come out there. And they talked about making a James Bond kind of movie. And George Lucas says, no, I got a better idea. And this is where we get this. And they actually talked about it while they were building the sandcastle on the beach in Hawaii. Genius minds. I mean, inspiration strikes anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. And then it took a while for anybody to kind of pick up the script. And you know who okayed the script finally?
Well, Paramount, but I don't know who at Paramount.
So it was who originally he was soon to become head of the House of Mouse, but it was Michael Eisner. Was the head of Paramount at the time.
That's right. And then George Lucas cut a nice little deal with him.
Yeah, he got 40% of the profits.
Yes.
So Lucas was always the wheeler and dealer with all of this.
Oh yes, very smart individual.
But this movie just has so many iconic scenes. You have the boulder at the very beginning.
Right.
You have the fear of snakes, which leads into the well of souls. You have the map room. You have and obviously the final scene at the Ark of the Covenant. Just all so well laid out, so well designed that to me it's just movie magic at its finest. And I don't know that anything has ever really been able to capture that as it was back in 1981. Just because,
right, in 1981. Yes.
Well, it's just because even stuff now. I mean, back then, that was all practical. It was all built, and nowadays everything is all CGI and built in computers and green screen and all that. You didn't have that back then. These are real stunts, real people doing stuff, and even Harrison Ford did a lot of his stunts for this.
Right.
So that's why I guess I respect this movie so much for doing those things on a $19 million budget, which
that's actually why a lot of studios turned it down. They said there's no way you can make that movie with that amount of money. It should cost more, and they turned it down. How odd is that you turned it down because you think it should cost more?
Right.
Usually it's your budget's too high, you need to bring it down.
Yeah, and then it came in on time, early and on budget.
Do you know why it came in early? They were in Tunisia filming a bunch of this, and everybody except for Steven Spielberg got sick.
Right.
And the heat was unbearable. It was just, it's Tunisia, it's over in Africa.
Yeah.
So it was really bad, but Steven Spielberg ate a bunch of SpaghettiOs. He just ate canned food. It's
probably pretty smart. But that, when they got sick, led to one of the funniest scenes in the movie.
Right.
Which is where Indiana Jones was fighting the black draped swordsman.
Right.
And he was just like, I don't feel good. Can we just shoot him?
Yeah, because they were supposed to have a fight scene.
Right.
And like you said, everybody was getting sick in that, and Harrison Ford just said, "Can I just shoot him?" He's like, "Sure," but from that, that's an iconic scene. It's just, and the Three Musketeers with Charlie Sheen and Keith Sullivan, they interacted. I mean, I don't know, paid homage to it or something like that, where Ortho or something like that, the one swordsman's going out, and he goes, and he just shoots them.
Right. Yes.
So
yeah.
And one movie called UHF with Weird Al Yankovic imitates the opening scene, but he does it with it's a spoof.
Right.
So it's everybody's, whether it's comedy, whether it's Magnum PI, they're all paying tribute to this iconic movie.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a Simpsons episode somewhere where this is all done.
Well, knowing the Simpsons, they probably did it before this movie came out and predicted it.
Right.
I'm kidding. It came out in '89 on the Tracy Ullman Show.
So, but this would eventually go to become the #1 movie of the year, and
almost $400 million.
Yeah, which is amazing for back then.
Oh yes.
Still didn't beat Star Wars, but it was soon
another George Lucas film.
Right, I know. But then Steven Spielberg would win the day the following year with E.T. But that's getting ahead. So, what were some of your favorite scenes or characters?
I actually like Marion, the love interest for Indiana Jones. When we first see her, she's having a drinking contest in her own bar.
Right.
Which I don't know if you should ever try to outdrink the bartender at the bar,
no.
Especially if they own it. But I like that scene because it plays out over a long scene, because Indiana Jones comes in and says, "Hey, I need that item that your dad gave you." And then when he leaves, then the Nazis come in and say, "We want that same piece, and we're gonna get it from you." Well, it's literally sitting on the table, but it's just such a long, drawn-out scene in a good way that's one of my favorite scenes. I like the scene where they're battling at the airplane, the dual-prop airplane.
Probably one of my
fighting.
favorite scenes, yes.
I know it's a gruesome scene at the very end, but I just like that scene. And a couple things.
The funny thing about that one is that was all choreographed on the spot. None of that was kind of storyboarded ahead of time. So they all just kind of figured out then. And unfortunately, that plane got a little bit out of control and rolled over Harrison Ford's leg.
Yep.
And he tore his ACL. And I don't blame him. He was like, "I do not want to go get medical attention here in Tunisia." And they just wrapped it, and he just kept going and then finished the film.
The guy he was fighting, that big giant of a man, and I don't remember his name, he played 2 roles in the movie. He was actually in the scene I just told you about, in that bar scene in Nepal. Right. And he got shot or burned up or whatever his character happened there, but that was of course he had a wig and stuff like that because he was bald. But that was pretty cool. I think
he's been in every one of the James Bond roles, and the Indiana Jones movies.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I don't know the roles.
You stumped me on every review. I don't know what you do. So we talked a little bit about what a couple of my favorite scenes. What are yours?
So the airplane scene that you're talking about before, that's probably one of my top scenes. And then it's also because if you ever been to, and I think it's gone now, but the Disney World where they do the Indiana Jones Spectacular, they replay that in live action. So it just keeps rebuilding on my excitement for that scene. But my second favorite scene, as far as action goes and just nonstop, is the car chase from when they leave the airplane scene to when they get to where they open up the Ark. It's just it is a long scene, and it just builds and builds and builds and builds until, and the best part of that is just, I mean, literally Harrison Ford is doing a lot of his stunts. They actually drag him behind a truck on the dirt, and so you feel, the hurt that he's doing, and he's getting injured, he's getting shot, and he's still trying to hold on and try to do whatever he can to try to make to achieve his mission.
Right. That's true. Any other ones of that, or is those two your main one? I know you said the opening scene.
Yeah, the opening scene. But then as far as cinematography and how well it's shot, where they're digging for the Well of Souls. It's just
it's turning dusk.
Yeah, when it's turning dusk, you see the silhouettes of everybody, and then you feel the tension when they're getting ready. It's nighttime when they're opening up the well, and then you see the clouds and the lightning. It's almost kind of like God is saying, "Don't do this."
Right.
It's like you don't want to do this.
Very ominous.
Right.
Nighttime. I even wondered, with so many people there working for the Nazis, because they found the wrong location.
Right.
Well, I guess you didn't find. Yeah, because they went to the map room. They had it in the wrong place.
Correct.
They went to the wrong spot. But with so many people there, how come they didn't notice these other workers were working at night? They only saw them during the day when they were bringing it out.
Yeah, that's... I mean, it was like nobody ever looked that way.
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's all right. Did you have any issues with the movie?
I really didn't.
One issue I actually had, well, there's a couple of little things. When they had some of the fight scenes, and I know they're not, unless it's stunt people, you're really not hitting the person, basically.
Right.
But I have a problem in any movie when they make a swing and they're this far from the person's face and they fall over. It's like, turn the camera angle or do something. If it's head on and you see the other person back of their head and you swing across, you can't tell. But we talked about Adventures in Babysitting before. We never talked about that, but there's one
at the end of it where it's just
so obvious, and it's like really?
the one movie that stands out with me for that, and granted, it is a comedy, but it's the movie Airplane when they're doing the Saturday Night Live ripoff, and not Saturday Night Live, Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah, I knew what you
but you have the Girl Scouts who are fighting, and it's totally they're just throwing punches right here. But I digress.
The other thing, actually, the only real problem I had with it, when Indiana Jones gets on the submarine, and they start going to the underground submarine base, as the submarine's coming into the base, he's already in the base, and he's watching it come in. It's like, how did you get ahead of the submarine when you were on the submarine, and then climb up through everybody? Because the sailors and the army that's in there, they're going to see you come swimming up. So I've seen one of the underground naval bases, a submarine naval base, firsthand, that was used during World War II on an island. There's no way you're sneaking up on it, swimming up to it. Yeah.
My only issue with that whole thing, because there were some scenes that were filmed that they cut out that kind of helped explain how he got to that point, because he was just kind of holding on to that little ladder, and I was like, you're not going to be able to hold on to that. But it did show that in the other deleted scene, it was that he had wrapped his whip all the way around and wrapped it around him to kind of hold him in there, and that he about died of hypothermia by the time that he had got there because it was so cold.
But that would mean the submarine stayed on top of the water the entire time.
Right.
Submarines
don't
normally do that.
And when they did the little map and it kind of showed you where it went,
yeah, they'd be underwater the entire time.
It was a long trip. It wasn't like it was 30 minutes.
No.
So no, I do agree with you. There was a little bit of suspension of disbelief with that.
And I want to go back to, let's say, the opening scene.
Right.
Where all the booby traps that they have.
The booby traps?
The booby traps. Yeah, that's what I said. And I talked about this when we did Goonies. So you've got to watch them all. And I hope you've already subscribed, which we didn't mention that. Subscribe, like, share, so all your friends get to enjoy this as well. But I brought it up during Goonies, and I actually mentioned this movie. How do you know the traps are going to work? When you step on the things and the arrows, how and I know you don't have the answer.
Right.
But it's like, how do you know? And after 500, 200, 300, how many ever years these traps have been in place? Like that boulder. How do you know as soon as you get past the one thing? Oh, I know what I wanted to talk about real quick. When he has the statue and he's trying to weigh out the sand.
Yeah.
I've always wondered this, even from when I was a child, that the thing is sitting on and he takes it off. Forget the bag of sand's not the right weight. It goes down. Wouldn't it be if you took a weight off, it should rise? Because you're releasing the pressure?
No, I think that was when it realized that the weight was not the same. It sunk down to create some mechanism that called everything else to go. And
I guess that makes sense if so technical that it realized it's not right.
Yeah.
If that thing was made of solid gold, then that was pretty heavy.
Yeah.
In that little bag of sand, he actually took some out. I bet he regretted that afterwards. Yeah. And whenever he's running back, and the guy says, "Throw me the idol, and then I'll get you." I'm like, you automatically knew the guy's going to run off.
Right. Yeah.
And I think he could have ran and jumped over that.
So you know what the idol was supposed to be symbolizing?
Was it fertility?
It was a fertility guide, yeah. And it was supposed to be the head of a woman who was giving birth.
Squatting down and giving birth.
While she was screaming.
Obviously, we're men. We don't know that, I would kind of rather guess that.
But if you were giving birth in the jungle of South America, probably...
You couldn't take me to a hospital?
Could be screaming as well.
Can we talk about, I know it's kind of an off thing, but like the casting director.
Okay.
Jane Feinberg. I just wanted to bring it up real quick because she did Back to the Future. She did Indiana Jones. She did E.T. I believe she did Aliens. She did Goonies. And there's a whole list of other things. So it's like she's tied in with some of the most iconic movies of the 80s.
It sounds like she was tied in with Steven Spielberg.
Well, yeah, I guess so, yeah. That's true, but it's just amazing when you think about it, how important a casting director is to a movie.
Yes.
Like you said, looking at Tom Selleck or some of these other people for these different roles, and it's like you've got to have an eye for what that actor or actress can bring to the movie.
Yeah. Well, let's also talk about, if you're talking about the crew, the person who wrote the screenplay was Lawrence Kasdan, who had just got off of Empire Strikes Back, and just another monumental writer that had kind of gone on to do more things. Now, I do not know whether or not which one came first. I seem to thought that I read that Raiders was his first major script, but he did do Empire Strikes Back first.
I got you.
I mean, that movie came out first before this one did. So, but yeah, and then obviously Kathleen Kennedy was one of his production assistants who now basically runs Lucasfilm, and her partner Frank Marshall, which the Kennedy and Marshall have done a lot of Spielberg's, and actually Frank Marshall is the pilot in the airplane that Marion knocks out, which starts the whole cascade of the oils and all that kind of stuff during that scene in Tunisia. Because the pilot who was there had gotten sick, and Spielberg needed somebody. So he went to the producer and said, "Get in the cockpit."
Very nice. Talk about Marion. This was in 81.
Right.
I was quite young in 81, but I did see this. I honestly can't tell you if I saw it in the theater. The first movie I remember seeing was E.T., which obviously E.T. came out after this. So I may have seen this in the theater.
Maybe a reissue or whatever.
Something, yes. But like Marion, who's played by Karen Allen, I know her more from Scrooged, the Christmas movie with Bill Murray, And Dellenholm, I'm going to get that wrong. Elliott, who played Marcus.
Denham Elliott.
Yeah. Sorry. I know him more from Trading Places, which came out in '83 as Coleman, which is sad. I mean, obviously they were in here first, but it's like you picture like Harrison Ford. You automatically picture with this movie,
right?
I don't picture them with this movie, even though they're in it and they're
okay
major stars. You know what I mean?
Well, I guess I do because this was the first time I saw her. This is the first time I saw him. Now, she was discovered by Spielberg after she did Animal House.
Right. And 77, I think. Close
or
enough.
78, somewhere around there. Yeah, one of those two. And then we can't forget John Rhys Davies as Sala. Which was originally going to go to Danny DeVito. Which I just cannot imagine that.
No.
Could you imagine Danny DeVito at the top of the Well of Souls goes, it's very dangerous. You go first.
Well, it doesn't even make sense. You're in an Arab country.
Well, I think they probably would have rewritten the role.
Yeah.
But
I guess he could have been
but I think they would not let him loose from his taxi contract to go do this movie. And then they found him, which was he was a Britishly trained stage actor,
right?
And the role
he's
looking at the casting list, and he's like, this is for a 5'3" guy who's short and fat, and I'm like 6'2", and
No, I think it worked better that he was in it than Danny DeVito. I love Danny DeVito.
Yeah, but Sala gave it kind of a. He gave it a little bit more heart to it. I mean, he was kind of like just the little side character who was there to help and will do whatever he can to help. And so it's great, which is wonderful to see him again in the third one.
Yeah, and very trusting too, because Indiana Jones goes to him and he's like, "Oh, let me see that," and Indiana Jones just hands him the thing, and he doesn't betray him like a lot of people do during that time.
So one of the last things I want to talk about is the music. And that's by John Williams.
Oh, yes.
The music is so iconic.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, literally, each part of that movie that has its own theme. The map room has its theme. The Well of Souls has its theme. You have the Raiders March. You have the car chase scene.
Right.
And then the final showdown with the Ark of the Covenant. And each one of those is just its own like orchestral arrangement that just is almost like a regular album of an artist who just has 10 different songs.
Right.
These don't have a lot of crossover with them, which is just wonderful for a score. You don't see that a lot because a lot of times you'll have in a movie where they just keep playing the same thing a little over and over with slight variations, but it just brought more depth and to these things. And then during the scenes, the songs just kept really just intensifying as you would get through the scenes and just really get you more on the edge of your seat. And then it was, and also with the fact that the main theme, which we all know, is that, a lot of times in movies nowadays, that main theme is kind of brought out right at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
And this really wasn't done that. It was you had it kind of touched on a little bit.
Right.
But then when Indiana Jones got in his full glory, I mean, boom, there it was. You just like, go get it.
I think the last thing I would like to touch on is the special effects, which was done by Richard Edlund. And when you see it, especially now from 2021,
right?
When I was watching it again for this review, I was like, that looks just like the special effects in Ghostbusters. It kind of is. It's the same.
Yeah, we talked about him, how he had left ILM.
Yep.
Go back and watch our first one, Ghostbusters, and we talk about Edlund leaving ILM. But yeah, he was amazing.
Yeah, so you see the same things, especially whenever they take the cover off the Ark of the Covenant and all the lightning comes out and the spirits come shooting out.
Right.
And it's like, when you watch it now, you're like, it's just like Ghostbusters, which came out in 85 or 84.
Yeah.
And so one day I'll get the dates right. I'm usually great on trivia, except for when I'm recording. That's okay.
That's all right.
But that's the last thing I want to touch on with that.
Well, there was just, I mean, again, there's just kind of like, really anything that Spielberg and Lucas did as far as special effects were always at the top of the game.
Right.
That nobody else really matched it. And they just made it look to even where I feel like today, yes, it's dated, yes, that's 40 years ago, but it still looks great.
Right. Yes, it does.
And I just think that's why I think this movie just really holds the test of time. I mean, you could go watch this anytime. Again, a period piece, so it's easier for it to do that.
Right.
But it just, I can have my children's children watch this, and I think they'll just still feel the excitement that I did when I first saw it.
Those are called grandchildren. Children's children.
I was trying to be
You're
useful
not,
with words.
You're not old enough for grandkids.
Praise Jesus, no.
Hope I'm not. No, that's okay. Well, let's wrap it up. Any final thoughts? I've said everything I need to say. So.
No, I just think that this movie has stood the test of time. I mean, Harrison Ford was a star when he was playing Han Solo, but this just took him to a whole nother level. Right. And just made him a bankable movie star.
This was the first time he was the lead actor,
right?
From what I read.
Yeah.
So after that, they're like, okay, he can be a leading man. And
yeah, which got him Blade Runner, and then honestly, just kept going.
Jack Ryan, and some of the Tom Clancy movies.
Right. So, but anyways, what are your thoughts on Raiders? Do you like it as much as I do? So tell us what you think. Put comments down below.
After you subscribe.
Please subscribe. We got more movies coming out for you, and we hope to see you soon.